So welcome to session number 22. So we're taking a slightly different approach now. We're going to take the view at the whole of a city level with Adam Kurdahl from Spol Architects in Brazil. Now, this presentation, we're going to look at reinventing the city, and we're going to look at it from an architectural perspective, but also look at the way in which ArchiCAD's used to enable Spol Architects to deliver their projects against it. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Adam. Thanks a lot, Adam.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure. Guess that everybody's tired, almost 24 hours. I'm going to be talking about placemaking, reinventing the city, which it's kind of an irony, because placemaking, the way I see placemaking, is all about creating spaces, public spaces for people to meet and bringing people together. I'm working from Sao Paulo. Been the last 14 months in home office, more or less, without seeing anybody. Even our colleagues, we only see them in endless Zooms and Teams and Meets and whatever. So it's kind of ironic to talk about placemaking. But we all believe that one day we're going to get the vaccine and we'll get back to the city, and the city is going to come back, and once again we can meet, and public space will be the most important part of our work and of our life, because this is really what defines our city is the space between the buildings, not so much the objects of the building, but the space between the building. That's what I believe defines a good city. So that's what we're working with, trying to make great cities, making better cities. So just short, our company is called Spol, and this is really Sao Paulo, Oslo, Sao Paulo down in Brazil, Oslo here, which is basically our logo, which is basically this exact line of 16 degrees between Sao Paulo and Oslo, which became our logo. Why is that interesting? I think that's interesting because, I mean, Oslo is the smallest capital in the world. It's super green, it's super pleasant, it's full of nature. You're always close to the fjords, you can go skiing. It's like this democratic dream city. And then you have Sao Paulo, one of the biggest cities in the world, which is this endless megapolis with very little green space or green space in between, and very little natural features, because it's basically an inland city. It grew from the coffee production in Brazil, and it was closest to all the coffee production in Brazil, and then down to the coast. So it's one of these very rare cities that is not sitting on the coast but actually inland, which means Sao Paulo has almost no natural features. It's a purely man-made city, but it's a man-made that has very little public space, very little quality public space, at least, because every undertaking at this scale, I mean, the rapid growth of the city has become private initiative, buildings after building after building after building. So it's very hard to have a coherent urban plan or strategy that creates good quality urban spaces, and that's what we try to do, look at how to create these quality urban spaces, placemaking within our project, whatever that is, in the private sphere and the public sphere. That's what I'm going to be talking about today, and that's why this contrast between Sao Paulo and Oslo is really interesting for our work, to see these two extremes. Of course, everybody believes that Brazilian architecture used to be like on the forefront of architecture, mainly due to this guy here, Oscar Niemeyer, who designed Brasilia, right? And he designed, basically Brasilia was, the slogan for Brasilia was 50 years of progress in 5. It's a fantastic slogan. And they built the entire city of Brasilia in 5 years. And so that means, I mean, he had to produce these fantastic pieces of architecture, singular pieces of architecture, objects. And so this is the strength of Brazilian architecture, but it's also in many ways the problem of Brazilian architecture, because everybody believes in Brazil that architecture is about singular objects. And it's very much due to the legacy of Oscar Niemeyer, because he made these fantastic sketches that we all know. And then, of course, there's an army of architects turning that, and engineers turning that into reality, but all we see is the object and the sketch. Our way of working is, I think, is much more difficult, probably. paranoid critical method, as this is Salvador Dali, who, this critical method where you always question yourself, you're always critical, you always look for new ways of doing it. I see our work much more as kind of editors of ideas, always looking for the best ideas, like the editor of the newspaper, trying to bring forward the best idea. It doesn't matter who has the idea. There's no longer this master architect that makes the sketch, but it's all. And here we see this is an example of Brazilian architecture, right? Of Oscar Niemeyer. This is Brazil, this vast plain with these singular objects signaling in plain with very little connective tissues between them. Really beautiful, fantastic objects, world known, but that creates this problem that, the dream of Brazilian architecture is exactly this, and everybody expects the architect to design architecture in one night, just like Oscar Niemeyer did. So Brazilian architects have very little time to work and design because, they're used to architecture being produced overnight. And then I came to Brazil more or less at the time when this cover was on The Economist. Brazil was this promising future. Of course, then there was the Mensalão, the big corruption scandal. Has Brazil blown it? The betrayal of Brazil, and now even worse, as we see the burning of the Amazonia and all the other problems that Brazil is facing at the moment. So living in Brazil is really like a cardiac diagram. It's just kind of up and down. It's kind of non-stop. But I believe if we zoom out a little bit, we see that in the long perspective, Brazil is growing, Brazil is getting better. But day to day is really stressful. But we have to, as architects and urban planners, have to take a bigger picture, a longer perspective on this. As an example, New York, 30 years ago, New York was the most dangerous city in the world, right? This is a subway in New York. And today, New York is like the most pleasant city in the world, full of tourism, full of everything. And it's very much due to this gentrification of the city. And you can argue that New York has lost some of its identity going for this European washed idea of the city. But I think in Brazil, Brazil needs everything still, so we have these possibilities to really imagine the future, to look to the future and imagine a new future, a different future, chances and opportunities that we don't have in Europe, because Europe is already, everything is built and the population is shrinking. Brazil has a growing population and it has a lot of people that is being lifted out of poverty into middle class, so there's a big need for construction and infrastructure. Brazil used to be in the forefront of modernism and with these fantastic, this Lina Bobardi, these fantastic projects. But there's this problem, these are the projects that Oscar Niemeyer designed. This is his first commission that he designed in Pampulha, where basically the mayor of Pampulha called of Belo Horizonte called him and asked him to design these things, but you have to present it tomorrow. So he went back to his hotel room and he drew all night, and he presented the next day this famous building that afterwards he became to design Brazil, the capital, because of this. So this was really the groundstone of Brazilian architecture. Architecture is something you do in one night. So this is the result. This is really Sao Paulo, how Sao Paulo is going. These singular pieces of architecture. You put a tower, a wall around it, and you have this endless amount of traffic, and you have helicopters because the traffic is so dense, so people that can, they take a helicopter, and you're really turning the city into this medieval castles of the city, which is a collage that we made some years ago. And you see, these medieval walls surrounding these towers is really what the city is turning into. Sao Paulo is this mega city. It's the capital of South America economically, but it has no public space almost whatsoever. This is Rio de Janeiro, this fantastic public space, the natural public space, and here's Sao Paulo to the right, the Paulista Avenue, the main avenue in Sao Paulo that every Sunday closes and is full of people, not now because of the COVID, of course, but before the COVID, and it's hugely popular. And the Paulistanos, they really lack public space. They look for public space. So every time this thing closes, there are other streets that closes as well on Sundays, and they're full of people roller skating, sunbathing, making music, concerts, barbecuing. It's really a big party. So it's like the beach in Rio, but of course without these natural features. So Sao Paulo really is a city much like Holland, where I used to be, that everything is made by humans. I mean, so we have to imagine everything. The whole thing is artificial. So you create your own fun, you create your own pleasure, you create your own problems, you create your own public spaces, you create your own cultures. There's lots of culture, a lot of things going on because of this lack of pop. But unfortunately, a big part of the buildings are these singular buildings that are shooting up at a very high pace because of the economic growth of the city. There's a lack of housing, so there's lots of new housing projects coming, and they all look the same. All this collage is made with advertising from the newspaper from 1 week of new housing projects being launched in Sao Paulo, and you see they're all the same. So if we don't do anything, Sao Paulo is going to turn into this incredibly boring, ugly city defined by these housing towers, defined by developers, and a singular project, so with no regard for the public space, the space between the buildings, with what the Paulistanos really need. You see them on Sundays on the streets. They use it for demonstrations. So just to give an idea of how we work. So we always, as sport, we always look for that extra space, making space where nobody was expecting, a public space within the project. So a hotel in Trondheim in Norway, where we made a covered space so you could walk through. It becomes a plaza in the middle of the snowy city. Another place in Trondheim, a suggestion where a university campus building becomes a connective tissue in the city. In Amazonia, a school that becomes a community center. Here in Sao Paulo, a kind of a big mixed-use development where we turn the whole city block into public space. The central station in Oslo, where the station basically becomes a street, a public connection in the city. State, a co-working office building where the office becomes almost urban. So just very, very fast to show you, to give you an idea. So we always look for this extra space, this public space, this place for people to meet, to come together. So this is the hotel in Trondheim. It's in the north of Europe. So it's extremely cold. So what we did, we made this big covered space by breaking up the hotel, and we made a big covered space, which basically in this harsh winter, people can walk through the space to use this. Even though it's a private space inside the hotel, they can use this as part of the route in the city. It becomes a public space paid for by private money. And here's it's an image of the hotel, of course, referencing the Lina Bubati bridges from the Sesc Pompeia here in Sao Paulo. But you see basically this covered space, which is working as a plaza in the city. The university campus here, also in Trondheim, the idea that the university campus becomes a tissue, then instead of being a building, it becomes a series of public space that connects the top part of the city to the lower part of the city. So instead of being just a private university building, you can actually invite the entire city to pass through the university and use this building as part of the circulation in the city. In Amazonia, it's a similar thing. We're doing a school in the Amazonia. In this community here, I mean, they're sitting on the river, and they really need a school. This is the main road that connects Manaus, the biggest city in Amazonia, to the rest of the world. So all the transport from Amazonia, from Manaus, goes on this. What goes on the rivers, but lately the river's been dry, so you cannot sail on the rivers. There's no transport. All fridges and everything in Brazil is made in Sao Paulo, in Manaus, because of the tax breaks they have there. So all these goods pass on this road. So you have to imagine that every TV, every fridge, every freezer, everything sold to 200 million Brazilians pass on this one road here. And we came there some years ago to Amazonia, to the rainforest. I had this big dream of the rainforest. I still do. And this is what I saw: a completely dried out, burned forest. So the idea of the rainforest, I mean, the farmers here, they complain there's no water. We can't plant our crops because the forest is drying out. and you see it's dry. This doesn't look like rainforest, right? It's completely dry. So we were doing a school, so we're working with the local community, brought lots of models, lots of alternatives, involved them in the process, and did different models, and we ended up with this round thing which they chose. And the idea here again is to create this, instead of more than being a school, really being a civic space, being a space of reference for the entire community. So it becomes a community center where they can do lots of things, and the architecture gives it a kind of central position in the city. So here's the model, and here's the school under construction. And here in Sao Paulo, it's an entire city block where basically what we're suggesting is to organize, it's a mixed-use development, private development. So instead of making a closed-off development, we're suggesting to bring the public space in and through this building. So basically, we're connecting all the corners of the city block here, making these fronts, means that we have this urban organizer in the middle and these green plazas around it, and this where we can place the buildings. And then basically this is the result of this continuous ground floor with the green, where people can walk and you can connect through the city, and then you have all the commercial developments on top here. Oslo Central Station, it's the same idea. So the station, it's a competition for the station, and the idea is really how can we turn the station into a street. So this is the main station building, but it's also the street connecting the old part of the city to the new part of the city, this station boulevard that cuts through everything. So more than being a station, the central station really becomes this connective tissue, a street in the middle of the city that connects the city. Here's some models from the process. Here's an image of this new street, the station as a street. Reinventing State, it's a project here in Sao Paulo where we work together with the client on the outskirts of Sao Paulo, these big warehouses, and the client was saying to us, what are we going to do with them? We should demolish them. And we said, no, you should not. You have to keep these fantastic old structures. And what we did, we made one of the biggest co-workings probably in the world here in this warehouse. And what we did, I mean, this is the warehouse, and you see we pasted here an entire city block. So inside this warehouse fits an entire city block. So we realized we have one floor of 15,000 square meters. If you have an office space that big, it's no longer, I mean, it's 5,000 people are going to be working here. That's a small city in Denmark from where I'm from. So you have to imagine one floor office with the population of a small city. So it moved from being an office to actually being urban. So this is the space before we started the project, this fantastic 15-meter high ceilings. So then we start thinking, how can you define space within here? It's a deep playtime, the minimum intervention that makes the space, the Noli plan from Rome, defining the public and the private spaces. Pompeia, how we see the X-ray of the city and we see the public spaces in between. Lars von Trier, how do you define space with the minimum intervention necessary to define a space? And so this is really what the project is about. It's this big co-working 15,000 square meters. What is the minimum thing you need? And then how can we turn the office from being an office to being a city, and instead of being a virtual Tinder, actually being a physical Tinder? You go there and it becomes this kind of machine for meeting people. You don't need to be dating, but to meet people. So what we did is that we made this big public space in the middle of the office space. So this is a plaza. It's a public plaza from one end of the building to the other. So if you don't work here, you can actually walk through this plaza, and it has these trees, this nature inside. So this is the idea of this continuous public space. Here it is just during the construction with the trees just planted. Some images of the space. Here another image, so you see the entry here, and then to the other end you see the other entry here. This part is under construction. This one is already complete, and this one is almost complete under construction. This is an image that we made. Here's some more images of this space in between, and then back to Sao Paulo. So as I told you, the risk of Sao Paulo is that Sao Paulo turns into these singular towers that developers buys up lots of old buildings, demolish them and make a tower, buys up the next piece of land, demolish the existing building and makes a tower. So we're working in this project called the Lago Batata. Lago Batata is one of the biggest plazas here in Sao Paulo. You see, this is from a demonstration. I'm not sure if this is Carnival or a demonstration against Bolsonaro. I think this is against Bolsonaro. So it's huge public space. It's really important for the city because it's where you meet, the civic space where you make demonstrations, and it's what's lacks in Sao Paulo. It's one of the few public spaces in the city. So we ask ourselves, what kind of city do you want? So the Lago Batata is here, and our client basically asked us to help them to make a master plan for a big part of this area. Our client is a private developer, so they don't work with the city, so we don't control any of the public space whatsoever, but we can control the private space, the private development. So how do we do that? You see, it's this kind of almost in the eye of the storm between the main CBD district, the main artistic district, lots of high-rise buildings here, and here in the middle where we're working, there is almost nothing. Nothing has happened for several years. So it's kind of the silence in the eye of the storm. This the plaza, you see the buildings here around. This place is actually hugely successful, and lots of people go here. It's full of restaurants, it's full of bars, it's full of small shops. So it's really bustling part of the city, and our client is then investing here, buying up pieces of land. And as every good developer, what they would do is they would buy up all this piece of land here, demolish all this building, and make a big tower here. And we told them, you have to keep these existing qualities, this existing fabric, because why is it that everybody in Sao Paulo wants to go to Lago Batata? It's because it's full of restaurants, it's full of bars, it's full of shops, it's full of galleries, there are lots of people meeting here, and that's because of the quality of the street front of these buildings. So if you demolish these buildings and make a tower, you also kill this fantastic qualities with this, what you're trying to invest in. So we made a master plan together with them to see how can we keep all this existing fabric but combine it with these kind of towers. I mean, how can we insert more density but without destroying the historic city? So you see here, I mean, it's really the new center of Sao Paulo here, Pinheiros, you see everything here. Lago Batata, the plaza, it is one of the biggest plazas in the city. Praça de Sé, the main plaza in the center, Praça da República, and then the covered space under the Maspi Museum from Nina Bobali. So you see, it's really a big space in the city, which is this space that we see here. So it's interesting. So we have all this fabric here, which is the historic fabric of the city, and then we have Faria Lima here, which is the main business street of the city, which is what you see here. So our project is here. It has all these low rises, nothing happened, and then you see all the business tower here, the AAA towers here. So it's super close. It has a metro, which is a kind of unique quality in Sao Paulo. It's a metro which is not, that works very well, but not very extensive. This is an image from the area. You see at night, extremely popular. In a few years here, before and after, in 4 years, this was how it is before and this is how it is now. So this transformation is happening. So our question is, how can we keep these qualities, keep this transformation? How can we make a product that doesn't kill all these qualities? So the question is, what happens? Then there's a thing called Operação Faria Lima, which basically says, it's a law that says, if you join small plots to a minimum of 1,000 square meters, you can build 4 times. You can give a FAR of 4 times of your floor. Which means that basically what happens in Faria Lima is that everybody buys up the land, breaks down the building and these huge enormous buildings, which kills all urban life and basically turns it into this big boulevards full of cars. So it's exactly what we don't want for a great city, right? So basically before and after, if business as usual means that you buy up this, you demolish and you do this. And it's kind of detrimental to the public spaces, the headquarters of Google in Sao Paulo. So, urban revolution. I mean, Sao Paulo is experiencing a new urban revolution in terms of mobility. Bikes is a new thing in Sao Paulo. Bike lanes is a new thing in Sao Paulo. The metro is being expanded. Lots of people obviously are using the scooters. So how do you make a good city? So we work together with the client for them to understand what is that guarantees the city. So it's protection from the cars, diminish the amount of cars, security, short distance between entries, good lights, mixed use, so you have live 24 hours, space for new mobilities, shortcuts for people to walk, to bicycles, which is not usually considered in the city. So public spaces, how we can make public space. As I said, we only work in the private sphere here, so we need to understand how we can insert public space inside private investment. Climate comfort, of course. Lago Batata is one of the hottest places in Sao Paulo because there's so much asphalt and so little green that it is, if you measure the temperature, really the hottest place in the city. So it's very important to create shadows, protection against the rain as well, the heavy rains of Sao Paulo. Places to stay, in the public space, furniture that you can do, and experiences, protection from the noise, so you can actually experience things and hear what other people are saying. Continue with these active ground floors. Short distances, multifunctional city, lots of programs instead of these monofunctional towers with a wall around it. And then the scale of the human body. Keep this small thing that attracts people there. So what is the urban transformation, right? This is what we have today. This is why it's hugely popular. The prices are going up. This is what the developers want because they need to make their money back. So how do we do that? That plus that gives this. So this is really the project. How to keep the existing fabric and insert more density in order to bring more life down to the street, to put more people living there. So how do we do that? We take these blocks, because as I said, we don't control the public space, we control only private blocks and not every property in a private block, obviously, because not everyone wants to sell or be part of the project. So we make these internal routes inside the blocks, and we make these bigger routes that connect these loops that goes through the blocks. So you see here, this is the project, the multifunctional city. So the idea is to make monofunctional towers. The idea is not to make some mixed-use towers. It's a residential tower, it's an office tower, and then people have to go down. If you make an office tower, there's no canteen, there's no nothing in your tower, it's on the ground floor. If you make a residential tower, there's no gym, there's no pool, there's nothing in your tower, you have to go down and you use the city. So the idea is to design everything together. So here you see these internal loops, and then some of these internal plazas that we create by demolishing pieces and putting new towers, liberating space inside, and making these shortcuts. So this is an actual design here of the shortcuts through the city blocks, which you go in here, keep the existing buildings, and insert these new towers with this private public street that cuts through. So these are the loops inside. How do you make these loops? The existing buildings with the new towers. And this is what I said. Instead of making mixed-use development, it's really singular-use developments is what we see here. And then there's these different routes, the gastronomic route, the nightlife route, the retail route, the fitness route that really brings people together inside. So how do you do that? I won't go into the details of how to make a plan like this in Sao Paulo, but it's of course very much working with the law, understanding the setbacks, the heights, all the initiatives that we have to do this. How do you take this density that you could place in other places and place in towers in order to liberate your ground floor and make these public spaces in the middle of the city block. The fachada ativa, the street fronts, how you cut through here makes public connection and private, and what you gain for that in terms of, and then the programming of the spaces, the public spaces in the middle. So you make this multifunctional city with these internal plazas. So how do you do that? The timeline in order to do that. So this is where we are now. Activate the existing buildings. So that's what's happening. Then the next thing is to start consolidating public space, demolishing the less desirable buildings, demolishing these buildings to make the connections, and then to donate a project to the city to actually reinvigorate the entire plaza, and then in the last project to add these additional densities, these additional towers. And then we have here a video of do you do that? Because obviously, in order to do this, we have to work with entire city blocks, which is quite complex to understand which buildings keep, which ones do we demolish. There doesn't exist a good city map of this thing. So what we did, we made the script where we used Grasshopper and ArchiCAD and different programs to make a script. And here we take, let's go here again. What we did here is we take the map of the city and the property tax information, and we merge that together in a script. So here we can see the sizes of each property, and then we turn that into a map based on the script. This is the map, and then we actually get, and then we can put the different uses, the zonings here, and then we'll see that what we get out of this is basically a map that shows us exactly how it is. So based on the property tax information and the city map, which only has the outlines, then we can actually make a 3D model. This is generated purely from the script, so nobody drew this. This is from the script, this 3D model of the existing. And then we can start using this script in order to join together the plots, because we obviously cannot buy everything, but you might be able to buy these ones. And then understand what can you keep here, what can you build here, how much fits, which ones is it useful to buy, which one is it not useful to buy. And it's like endless possibilities, endless combinations. So we made this script that generates all this analysis for us and gives us the output, the economic output, the square meter output, and also tells about the restrictions, the setback from the streets, the maximum height, the permeable area, the heritage listed buildings, and the setbacks from the heritage listed buildings. So it's all in this program, and it comes straight out of this city map. So basically now with this script we made, we can apply this to every lot in the city of Sao Paulo and immediately get a 3D model and immediately see what are the potential. And then we can put in the cost of construction costs, the rents, the sales prices, and then we can kind of start tweaking it, and we can say, well, here at the plaza the rent is higher, closer to the plaza, it's lower here, and we can start tweaking, and then we get these 3D models. Of course, we still need an architectural intelligence or finesse to turn this into architecture, but it's a very good analytic tools that allows us very fast to analyze all these properties and make different scenarios, because what we need here really to work together with our client is to find the perfect scenarios in order for us to make this project livable. So here you see we can change the densities, the floor heights, the size of the floor plans, looking at how many lifts you need, what is the cost, and then we can start looking at the return of investment, because in the end, as I said, it's a private client, there's no public money here, so we need to prove to them that this strategy, instead of demolishing everything and building new towers, that this is a better strategy. We need to prove to them that they will benefit economically from keeping these existing fabrics and adding these new towers. So here, I mean, we put in the numbers, and then really start optimizing it for the taxes of construction, the cost of constructions, again. So the script does all these things, and then if our client calls us tomorrow and says, this property here I cannot buy it, or we need this property, then the script immediately runs these new scenarios for us. So we don't need so it's a much faster process, which allows us to have intelligence about which is the right solutions. And these are the terraces, the number of floors that we put in here. You see the number of floors in the different lots, and then this changes obviously the size of the towers and also the output. It changes the phasing of the construction. And then when we finalize all this, we can export it into an ArchiCAD model that allows us to actually start working on design. So here's optimizing it for the ArchiCAD output, controlling the things, controlling the layers, and then it becomes this 3D model that can be directly used for the architects to actually develop the projects, which we're going to see here some examples of this. Turns it into towers. This is still before the designs. Checking all the parameters that they actually work, every building, number of floors, how much is demolished, how much is constructed, what's the cost of demolition, what's the cost of refurbishment. All this information is in there, so it immediately gives us these outputs here. And let's see. Testing now for the rent and for the costs, for the sales prices, how you can, if the plot is the same, you can distribute your buildings differently within that same piece of land. The piece of land is all this green joined together, all these plots. So where do you put your building, where do you put your building mass? And this program then updates these models for us, which we then use afterwards to actually make the design. Almost done here, and then I'm going to see what is the result of this fantastic script. Just tweaking the last number of floors here. So that's that, and then we just go back here and go back. So, and then this is the result, right? Based on that script, of course, then we take it in and then we turn it into architecture. We start making designs, we tweak it, and we start making the connections, looking more carefully at the buildings, the existing structures, designing the towers. So these are some of the ideas of how that can turn out. Here, some existing towers behind here, and the new towers here, and the continuous public street inside the plot here, the connections, the main plaza is here connecting through here. And one of the other plots, the first one I showed here with the towers. So how do you do that? This is basically the phasing. So we start here, the plaza is here, this is the first project here, and then it kind of goes to the second plot, and then includes the plaza, and then in the end includes, the project can grow unlimited or limited. The success is not really dependent on the size, because already with this first project we already made these internal loops that guarantees this quality public space within the city fabric here. Just some more ideas here, and then the plaza Batata, it's called Lucky Batata. Batata is potato, because they used to sell potatoes here. This was the potato market of Sao Paulo. So really here we are suggesting to make this canopy in the shape of a potato, which can then be used for lots of different things, film screenings, whatever you want. And then an image here, and this is the final image with the potato here, the towers here, blending into the existing fabric, keeping the existing fabric here with the towers on top here. I think that was the last image. Now there's one more image here. Let's see, we have a few more minutes. This is another project we're working on. This is the river in Sao Paulo. It looks idyllic. It looks fantastic. The problem is this river is very polluted, because a lot of the sewage goes into this river. There's a big project cleaning it up. It's already much better. Last week there was an article in the newspaper that for the first time in many years people have seen fishes in the river, so it's going very well. So there is this ambitious project to turn the river into a place where you can actually swim. It used to be a place for swimming, but now it's basically a drainage canal, it's a sewage canal. But how can we reappropriate these spaces? Because this is, as I said, this is what Sao Paulo lacks, is public spaces for the city. How can we diminish the traffic, make bike lanes, boat lanes, for walking, for promenades and all these things. So this is the kind of the future of the city. I hope that Sao Paulo, from being this mega city with very little public space, really becomes a very pleasant city, learns a little bit from Rio de Janeiro, from the beaches, and managed to make not beaches, but to make public spaces, natural spaces with lots of nature in the city that will help the city. So that's what we're working on in Sao Paulo. And thank you very much. This is Spol. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that presentation, Adam. I can't hear me at the moment, I don't think, and his microphone's muted. We're trying to get through to him. Hopefully, he'll go live for us at his end soon. We're waiting for Adam to click on, so hopefully he'll be able to unmute in a minute. Anyway, anyone have any questions, please put them into the feed, into the chat, so that we can ask Adam some questions and close out this session. Looks like we caught Adam by surprise. Lots of people talking about how good the presentation was. Amazing diagrams and the like. And we'll just we're doing well. We've only got 2 hours left to go. Adam, you're on mute still. Can't hear you.
I'm sorry about that.
Presentation was, and you'll need to mute the stream.
Oh my god! How do I do that?
Just close it. That'll be right.
We're doing.
Okay. Better?
Perfect. Now,
Very good.
thanks very much for that presentation. Lot of praise from the audience at the moment about the project and how beautiful it was. We had a question from Zhu. Will this project be executed? In other words, will it get built?
Yes, it's already phase 1, which is the consolidation of the existing building, is already happening. I mean, the exact form you never know, because it's an organic project with an organic investment, so the exact form. But yes, it's already happening.
That's really good news. Now, Paul says, awesome presentation. Out of my depth, but very interesting. I'm assuming there's some Portuguese or another language I can't understand. Another comment from Zhu. I'm sorry, I don't understand that language. Congratulations,
yes,
Adam.
I can help you translate.
Carl Fitzpatrick, thanks, Adam, for reminding us why we got into architecture in the first place.
No, great. Yeah, no, I think we have a responsibility and a possibilities. I mean, that's basically our job, and it's true. I mean, I think a lot of people are forgetting why we got into architecture in the first place. Is exactly to make better places for people, right? And the city is where we need to start. Especially, I mean, you're sitting in Australia, and it's I know that you have fantastic waterfronts and cities, but we have a lot of work to do here.
Oh, it's a hard thing, isn't it? But Majaz, thank you for exquisite presentation. How do you comment hypothesis that character of public space equals identity of the city? Let's start with that one. So I guess I'm trying to think of how.
Totally. I mean, I think a lot of that's why Sao Paulo is so interesting, because Sao Paulo is totally inland, so there's no natural. I mean, there are natural features, but few natural features. If you go to Rio de Janeiro, for example, you always know where you are in Rio because you see the Sugarloaf, you see the deep sea. You can always orientate yourself. Yeah. Oslo is the same thing. Oslo has a lot of nature, a lot of topography, a lot of public space. So you can always, anywhere you go in Oslo, you know where you are because you can see. If I drop you anywhere in Sao Paulo, you have no idea where you are because it's this continuous urban fabric. So it's very hard to find your way around. So yeah, I mean, Sao Paulo is not known for its public space, but Rio is known for its beaches, right? That is the public space of Rio de Janeiro. So totally, it's very true.
So in addition to this is a follow-on question in the same query. In addition, how do you perceive the idea of public space acting like a scenography?
I think we as architects, we're too obsessed with designing objects and designing buildings. While what we should be doing, we should be designing the urban space. I mean, you have to consider the urban space almost like the interior. If you're an interior designer designing an apartment with all the finesse that you put into designing an interior space, we need to design the urban space with the same finesse, which too often is forgotten the quality of the urban space. I mean, and I'm talking about the urban space is the first 2 floors because that's where of the buildings, that's where our bodies are. Modern architecture make these
6-meter high glass fronts, and we're so excited as architects because we managed to make this super tall, 6-meter tall piece of glass, and look how fantastic it is. But actually, I mean, it gives no sensibility. There's no attraction. There's no tactility, right? So I think it's very true.
And there's the third question. Thirdly, did you use GIS data in the Batata project?
Not so much. No, we used more. I mean, we used the city map. We did another test with the GIS, and we actually didn't use the GIS. We used the maps, and we used actually the tax information. That was quite interesting. You have this thing called the taxes that shows you how much is built, how much are the properties, because there doesn't exist a survey of all these buildings. It doesn't exist a 3D drawing, and we have just the outline of buildings. And then we have the tax information, so we know how much square meter is built on each piece of land. And by joining those in the script, we managed to build a 3D model kind of automatically, which allows us much faster to be able to act and to work on it.
Now, John's got a question. What was the scripting software that you used that you were demonstrating?
It's a Grasshopper script.
Grasshopper. Yep, wonderful. Another comment about it being a beautiful presentation. Gabrielle says, I actually live around those blocks. The only problem with your project that I'm not the author. Chin drops, so jealous. That's great news. I'm sorry I can't read. Veronica, I'm sorry I can't read Portuguese. There's a lot of Portuguese comments coming up. Urban acupuncture. I like that.
Yeah, that's the big Brazilian urbanist always talk about what's his name, Jamie Lerner from Curitiba. He always talk about urban acupuncture, right? And you do one thing that changes the city. You do one small thing, you cannot change the entire city, but you do one acupuncture that managed to kind of have the effect of changing the entire city.
Yeah. Anyway, Adam, thank you very much for participating and contributing to this event with the other speakers. It's great to see how many people are on to participate in your session, and you know, it'd be great to catch up. Hopefully, when travel opens up and there's a Graphisoft Key Client Conference to attend again.
Yeah, looking forward.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Adam.
Pleasure. Fantastic event, Nathan. Fantastic. Thank you.
And for everyone else, we will have a break for about 14 minutes and come back with our second last session for the day.